Royce Williams was a fighter pilot who did the impossible. Against all odds, he single-handedly took on 7 MiG-15s and won. Join us in this episode of Legends of Aviation as Williams himself details his incredible dogfight and career.
First airplane I flew was a Ford Tri-Motor out of a grass field in South Dakota when I was 4 years old. Flew with my grandmother, she was 80. First flight for both of us. I used to fly with a barnstormer going around the county fairs and so forth as a kid. So I joined when I was 16, right after Pearl Harbor, and I went into the Army. And when I turned 17, I was eligible for naval aviation, the cadet program. Following that, I went to Conway, Arkansas with War Training School, and that was a flying experience. And we flew out of a grass field, and I was flying an open cockpit biplane N3N made for the Navy, and a lot of them were on floats for the Naval Academy. So I trained there and got my initial qualifications and continued to fly out of dirt fields. Then following that school, I went to University of Georgia pre-flight, and more ground school, more athletics, a lot of military training, and other items. But upon completion, I went to Memphis, Tennessee, to fly the N2S Stearman. Same, pretty much basic flying, emergencies, kind of get your head on straight and what you would do if bad things happen. By surprise, we came out from flying one evening, and the operations officer asked for volunteers, and you're told not to volunteer. 3 of us did. One of them was my buddy with the great name of Chris Kringle. And we were told to fall out and report it in the operations office. And there the ops officer said, just to show that volunteering isn't always bad, you guys go back and get your dress uniforms on. We'll set a car and pick you up. You're going to the Bob Hope show. All the other cadets are watching or shaving and getting clothes, and they know nothing about it. They were wild. We didn't tell them till we got back. It was wonderful. Following that, I went to Pensacola. I first started flying a metal airplane, an SNV Vultee vibrator, they called it. And we did have flap and a lot of the same thing of emergencies, emergency landings, aerobatics. And upon completion of that, we went to another school, another base, and it was S&J. Then I went school there in SBD, which was a very operational airplane at that time, and big in the Midway combat effort. It was selected for fighters, and so I went to the fighter training base in Hellcats in Opelika, Florida. Upon completion of that, I came back to Pensacola and got my carrier qualification on the USS Ranger CV-4, first ship built as an aircraft carrier from the keel up. We would fly sort of an ASW patrol because the German submarines were operating in that area, Bermuda and in the Gulf of Mexico and whatnot. But as far as getting shot at, I had to wait for another war. Everybody likes to know I flew Corsairs. My brother checked me out. He was a Marine at that time and at El Toro, and I was at Los Alamitos. And he came over one day and I checked with the ops officer. I was due to check out, and I said, okay, if my brother does it, sure. So he did that, and later I checked him out in the Bearcat. But, I went from there aboard USS Princeton, deployed in the South Pacific, and mainly in the Philippine area, but we got up to Tsingtao, China, and Japan and whatnot. And then I did it a second time in flying Corsairs. The second time I was flying Bearcats, a wonderful airplane, my favorite airplane. The best thing out of that was I came back and I got married to my sweetheart that I knew for 77 years, and met when I moved from South Dakota to Minnesota, and the first day in Sunday school, there she was. We were 11 years old. I had to give her a engagement ring later when I could afford it. I used to work on farms for $1 a day for 18 hours, and I thought that. Then I joined the military, and it dropped down to $21 a month. So I wasn't putting a whole lot away, and when I proposed, while on leave, the best I could do was pin my wings on her, but that worked. Later on, I made a little money and I bought her a diamond. I got a 4-year degree and still had a quarter due me, so they sent me to Monterey PG school, and at that time, the Korean War broke out. And I expected to go immediately because I thought I was probably about as qualified as anybody in the Navy, but they finished the school, and then I went to Miramar. All my early flying was out of North Island. Now we were operating out of Miramar. So I was there going to a Corsair squadron because I was qualified in them. But I saw the jets over there, and I had a hankering, and I found out who the commanding officer was. I knew the commanding officer of the Corsair squadron too, but I found out I knew the CO. I called him that night and told him I would like very much to be in his squadron, and he said, see what I can do. And the next day I got transferred to Panther Squadron. It was a good, solid airplane. You felt comfortable in it. Easier flying than a prop because you don't have fuel mixtures and a lot of things to monkey around with, and torque and what. So it's just straight down, easy takeoff, comfortable. On arrival, we went to the normal operating area, which was on the 38th parallel. Pretty much that's where we operated. We were logistics. Logistics wins the war. And so anything that was moving munitions and war materials was fair game, including ox carts, which were not our primary target, but the sampans. I think I shot at one once. But mainly trains, trucks, railroad tracks, marshalling areas, tunnels, bridges, dams, and close air support for the troops. So flying at the 38th parallel was putting us out of range pretty much to hit some of the major targets that we should be covering. And so Admiral Jocko Clark and his troops decided to pull 3 carriers and 20 support ships, and dead of night move up off Tianjin, which is a coastal city maybe 100 miles south of Yokosuka. But from there, couldn't go further than the Yalu, which is a separation between North Korea and the Soviet Union. Not a whole lot of anti-aircraft. They weren't expecting us. I guess they weren't as well protected as some of the targets down at the normal operating area. But first light, we hit the targets. And I came back and they told me to remain suited, go get something to eat, and come back. You got the Combat Air Patrol next. I did. We got briefed on it. I had a flight of 4. My roommate was the leader of the flight. He was a reserve lieutenant out of Detroit. And the others, and I'd never flown with any of them before. I think we were all more or less strangers. A frontal system had moved in, and it was a blizzard, and low visibility, and ceiling probably 400 or 500 feet. So right off the catapults, we joined up in the clear and then climbed in his formation to on top of the clouds, which happened to be 12,000 feet. They had picked up, and other warning systems alerted them that there was inbound unidentified aircraft. I call them bogies. So I knew about this while we were still climbing. Once we came through in the clear air above 12,000 feet, I saw the contrails to the north of us, maybe 40 miles by this time. And they were closing. We were about opposite courses. Flight leader at that time had a warning light for his fuel system for the engine. And he was directed to take his wingman and remain over the task force. So I took charge. I turned on my master armament switch so everything was working, test out the guns and radar, and everything was ready to go. And so they said, that's your target. So I headed in their direction climbing, and they were probably at least 50,000 feet. A lot of times they would go 55. But when I got to 26,000 feet, they split, 3 left and 4 right, to bracket me, and dove out of the contrails and headed down to my elevation. And I told them I lost sight, and at the same time CIC said they lost him on the radar. So they instructed me to head back, and they'd be putting me on a patrol of sorts to be between the last sighting of the MiGs and the task force. So in that turn back to establish a barricade, 4 of them that had turned off to the right of the formation came in at my level in a loose formation, all shooting. And I reported that and got instructed, do not engage from CIC. And I said, I am engaged. I'd already shooting, and maybe I reported the first guy I shot down, which was the tail in Charlie of that 4. At the same time, the other 3 came in from the other side, and no longer in formation. They were all broken up to take individual shots at me, which is normal, which they should have. And the other 3 pulled up smartly, really impressing me about the capability of my enemy. They went well above me, a couple thousand feet or so, and then reverse course, come at me head on, because I was still trailing them. I planned to get the guy that had just lost his wingman, but he was in the sun, and I noticed the others were already reversed and coming at me. So I switched over to the lead, who was the leader of all 7, this guy. And as I got around to aim at him, he was shooting. And when I thought I was in range and I had the solution radar and I pulled the trigger, and he quit shooting and pulled away. I don't know why. I think he was hit. But anyway, his wingman kept coming, and so I reversed over from the other guy, and we were head to head and in range, and I did the same thing, shooting with a good solution. And I think I hit him right off. He just kept coming, no maneuvering, stopped shooting, and just slid underneath me. I think he was dead. The others came in the other time, so now it's a big melee. But they may be down to just four airplanes fighting capable. But anyway, there was almost always somebody on my tail. And I had to keep these guys inside. So most of my flying was observing the guy shooting at me and maneuvering to spoil his aim. And then he would go on by, most of the time pull abruptly up to where my airplane didn't have the ability to get on at all. He's gone and safe by the time I get around in most occasions. But there's another guy right taking his place. There's always somebody at my tail. And I guess the next thing that happened, one came down, and instead of that quick pull-up, he turned flat at my altitude, and I got right on him close. And there was just a short burst and pieces coming off his airplane. And I had to maneuver abruptly to keep from hitting him. And so the game goes on. Somebody else is on my tail. And this lasted 35 minutes, which has never happened before or since. But anyway, I had another guy, and I had him smoking, and I don't know why. I should have left him. My mistake, because I never I was almost always turning. But I straightened out and continued to shoot, and I ran out of ammunition, and I gave the MiG the opportunity to hit me. He came right in behind me. I maneuvered smartly to pull off, but he got me right in the wing butt with a 37 millimeter and knocked out most of my capability. The engine still worked. It was in the engine accessory section, which is the hydraulics and so forth, so I lost aileron hydraulic boost, and it cut the cables to the rudder, so it wasn't operable. I could just go back and forth with nothing operating. But I had a good elevator, so I had just to maneuver a little bit to head toward the clouds that I'd left and the task force under it go home. And he just came around and settled in behind me because I couldn't maneuver except up and down. And he got perfect position, maybe 300 feet behind me, just pumping away. I can just see everything over me, but I just jammed the stick forward, and then I pull it back, and it's going like this and this, and it worked. He never solved the problem, and I saw him fire an awful lot of ammunition, but it didn't down me. And I got into the clouds, and I was pretty safe at that point. I don't know what's wrong with this airplane, but it's not flying right. And I considered ejecting. But I was a long ways from being picked up, and although I had an immersion suit, I would last maybe less than 20 minutes in the winter conditions in the water. So there wasn't time to get a ship or a helicopter to me, so I just stuck with it, not knowing whether it would work or not, but it was the best choice. So I'm proceeding toward the task force by myself. The lowering, I knew I didn't need radar control. I knew I'd break out in the clear at around 400 feet. And I did that just short of the task force. And as I came in, they were all at general quarters, guns free. And so at that point, they're cleared to shoot at anything that they don't recognize as friendly. There was no coordinate. There should have been, if I was an enemy, CIC should have alerted everybody that I am. But the liaison between the gunnery liaison officer and CIC broke down, and they didn't pass the word. So the ships fired at me. But my commanding officer had just taken off with his squadron to relieve me in the fight, and he saw what was happening, and he called off. He's friendly, and they stopped shooting. I never checked my fuel. I was just too busy to worry about it. Must have been very low on it. But anyway, they couldn't take me for about 10 minutes because they had spotted the flight deck to make one more run on Horiong, right on the Yalu River. And this bothered them, that seeing all this happening right across maybe 4 miles or something like that from them. And so they started launching a lot of aircraft and a lot of chatter, and they got real excited. But nobody strayed across there. All our runs just back and headed toward the carrier and south from the Soviets. I'm getting ready to land, and it's a straight deck. It's not an angled deck like today. So I had to wait for them to move all of the aircraft behind the barricade up forward of it before I could do the landing. Gave me some time to experiment and see how I could handle the airplane. I found that it would stall anything below 170 knots, which is pretty swift for landing aboard a carrier. But it's the best I had, and so I flew as the best I could to position myself to be behind the ship as it moves into the wind, so I'd be lined up pretty much to make a landing. Well, when I got signal Charlie, meaning land, I was in that position and talking to the landing signal officer and telling him about my speed, and he said to the captain of the ship, they're now on the landing frequency with me, saying he's coming in hot, Skipper, can you crank it up? He says, he can make 30 knots, and we were in a storm. It was heavy winds anyway. You bring him in any speed he wants. Well, okay, that takes care of that, but I couldn't line up with it. The carrier on its course that I should be on normally to be into the wind, but I was offside and I could not get over here and line up with the ship. So I was going to, if I got there, go across and in the drink. And I said, I can't line up. The captain of the ship had a plan. I got right in there, and he turned the ship around and lined it up with me, and I caught a wire, just normal landing, sort of. I had a plane captain that was interested in all the holes in the airplane. So he got a grease pencil around and he counted 263 holes. A lot of them very small. Some of the holes were coming out from the explosion of the ammunition. When I got out of the plane, I went immediately to my ready room and all of at general quarters, and I had a lot of friends, and they're smiling and smug. So I asked their intelligence officer, what's going on? He said, I had them all pledge that they wouldn't talk to you until I get through briefing you. Yeah, it made sense. I got orders to report to Admiral Briscoe, senior naval officer in the Western Pacific, headquarters in Yokosuka. I didn't see any of the guys that I shot down hit the water. I didn't know if maybe they could have flown back home. Beats me. My job was the guy on my tail, and I would drop whatever else happened ahead of that. So that's pretty much what I said, and I told him that, and it was the first guy, which my wingman left me to follow him down, and the other one that I knew that I knocked pieces and stuff off, that's probably for sure too. Well, they gave me credit for one in the probable. I went out of there with the instruction to don't talk about it, and I didn't. I didn't, with these other guys or anything, I didn't get in discussions about it because I felt if I did, I'm going to reveal something I'm not authorized to say. So the next day, they went on down to the hangar deck while the ship was tying up, and I talked to an air bosun there, and I said, gee, I'm the pilot of 106. I'd like to take a look at it. Last look, probably, because they were going to be moving it off the carrier. And he said, I'm sorry, sir, but we pushed that over the side. Well, he was in a position to know. So 50 years later, an admiral that I'd worked with a long time, from him being wing commander, and I was his wingman way back in the 40s, he had been high level in the intelligence service, and I was meeting at a tailhook reunion party. And he came and he said, hey, Royce, that story that the Navy has isn't true. You shot down more than that, didn't you? I said, I can't say. He says, no longer classified. You can now talk about it. Holy moly. Well, I didn't have anybody to talk about. If this is long gone and forgotten. But I came home and told my wife, and she said, oh, Royce. So that's sort of the culmination of that. So for a long time, even after that, I didn't go around and toot a horn or anything. Nobody knew anything about it until I was invited to a symposium at Pensacola. Well, the first I knew a lot about that I got at least 4 because I had their names, and actually I have a 5th name that I can't find it. The Russians, once they broke up from the Soviet Union and became Russia, one of the first things he put out in their paper was a story of that fight, and they listed the names of 4 of them shot down. So that word got around, and so I was an item of interest for a while, and they invited me to Pensacola to talk about it, which I did. I got up in front of a nice group of naval aviators, Navy personnel, which included one of the destroyer officers who came up and apologized for shooting at me. He was one of the gunnery guys on one of the closest destroyers that shot at me when I came back into the formation.
After winning the impossible dogfight, Royce Williams served as wing commander in Vietnam. He flew A-4 Skyhawks and F-4 Phantoms. He retired after serving 37 years in the Navy and was awarded the Navy Cross in 2023. Thank you for watching this Legends of Aviation episode. Please consider subscribing and sharing this video.